Hey there, I just wanted to give an update on my workshop. So I've got my new saw I'm setting up, and also I've got a new epoxy floor. So I used Armorseal 1000 in the workshop here, and I also did that in the garage. And I wanted to make a video about how I did that because the best method to put down an epoxy floor is to completely grind the floor down and then do your epoxy. In my case, I already had an epoxy flooring in the basement here and in the garage, and it was maybe about 30 years old from when the house was built. So instead of grinding that down, I used a method for re-epoxying over that older epoxy. And so I'm going to run through some of the steps that I did because I didn't see any YouTube videos out there on basically reapplying an epoxy coating to an existing epoxy coating. So we can go up in the garage and take a look at that as well, and then I will go through some of the steps I used, and it did turn out pretty successful. So here we are in the garage. As you can see, the epoxy floor turned out really nicely in here, and I just want to run through some of the steps I used to do that recoat. So as I had said before, a lot of times people are going to grind down and then apply the coating. In my case, I was reapplying over an old epoxy coating. One nice thing about that is it doesn't take quite as much material. When you are grinding down, it tends to soak in, so either you need more material or actually need to do sometimes 2 coats of the actual epoxy, which is going to cost you more money. So in order to do the prep for mine, I didn't really have a lot of pull-up or anything in any areas. The epoxy coating was in decent shape. It just looked a little old and it wasn't a color that I liked, and some of the flakes actually had come up too. So what I did was I put on some protective gear, which was knee pads, eye protection, hearing protection, put on a respirator, and then I used my angle grinder with a wire brush. And what I did was I just ran over the surface everywhere to make sure there wasn't any loose areas, to make sure I got that up. If there were any areas where there's a little bit of chipping, I ran over that with that wire brush to make sure I got everything up. Then I just took a pole sander, put on I think 100 or 120 grit, ran over the whole floor, and then I used a shop vac to get up all that dust. In the garage here I actually used a hose and hosed everything out to make sure that it was nice and clean, and then vacuumed it again. In the basement I didn't use a hose. In that case I just wiped it down with a cloth and also vacuumed a couple times to make sure I had a nice prepped surface. So the material I did use was from Sherwin-Williams. It's an industrial coating called Armorseal 1000 High Solids. This is 2-part epoxy. Basically I took that, mixed them both inside of a 5-gallon bucket, and then I just dipped my roller right in the bucket. So I had a roller pole, a roller cage, and then I think it was a 1/4 inch epoxy glide roller, which it's a woven roller with a solvent resistant core. And the actual recommendation for the Armorseal insert said to use 3/8 inch. I think that would maybe be overkill. I thought this 1/4 worked perfectly. And then I also just had a nylon polyester brush, a cheaper one, just to do the edges. And then I also had a mixer as well. You're going to want to get a mixer that you can hook into a hand drill in order to mix that epoxy real nice. And then also read all the instructions for the Armorseal 1000. There's a resting period for it before you use it. And so after I had put on all the epoxy coating, I also put on some flakes. In order to spread the flakes, you can either do that by hand, or you could also, and this is what I actually attempted to do, was to use a seed spreader. I used a battery powered one. I put the flakes inside, and then I just kind of spread with that. You're probably going to want to practice that a little bit, to practice what volume you're using, how you're spreading that, but that actually turned out to work pretty well. And then after I was done putting on the epoxy coating, another thing that I did is to put a top coat on that. And so there's a urethane coat from Sherwin-Williams as well called Rexthane, and I used clear. And basically this is going to help with the UV ray protection on the epoxy. It's also going to be an additional protective coating, and it's also going to help hold in all those flakes. So after I think it was 24 hours or 48 hours of the epoxy drying, then I put on some of this Rexthane. And in that case I used a stain brush to do the edges, and then I also used a Mohair roller. I think it might have been a 1/4 inch Mohair roller, could have been 3/8, but I had a Mohair roller, rolled all of that on, and it turned out really well. So those are some of the steps that I went through, and I have tested some areas for abrasion, and it seems like this stuff really isn't going to come up. I've got hot tires on my car rolling in here. I've been rolling some stuff on rollers around in my shop. I've dropped a few tools on it already, and I haven't had any damage at all. It seems like it's really holding up well. So hopefully this is useful for anyone that has a pre-existing epoxy flooring and they're thinking about maybe updating it. I think the Armorseal 1000 High Solids is a fantastic product, definitely something to look at instead of some of the box store stuff, which I've read some pretty bad reviews on it, that it's only going to last you a couple of years, and also have some experience from some friends of mine that have used that and even with good prep aren't really having great results. So hopefully this is useful for anyone that's looking to do a project like this, and leave some comments in the comments section. Thanks.